last week, Mr. Draghi published his report. He is the ex-commissioner with the new plans for the European Commission in regarding about the competitiveness of the EU. And there's so many things we should discuss about this report because there's so many things wrong with it. First of all, the timing. The report wasn't published until after the elections. And then, of course, this whole idea for the European army, which is not even the competence of the EU. And then the plan to boost 700 or 800 billion into the economy to save the competitiveness compared to the States and China. Then I'm really wondering, is it a good idea to borrow so much money, have common debt with the EU member states, that eventually a part of the bill will have to be paid by you, the taxpayer? So many questions, but luckily for us, with me today is Professor Furfari. He is a professor at the ULB in Brussels in energy geopolitics. And welcome. We're so happy to have you back, Mr. Furfari.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to try to elaborate on this very important report of Mario Draghi.
Yes, it's very interesting because you actually last year wrote a book. It's called The Energy Insecurity, the Organized Destruction of the EU's Competitiveness. And now, of course, Draghi comes with a report on the loss of the competitiveness of the EU. What were your first thoughts when you read the report?
Well, you know, normally people working in the field of energy, and particularly geopolitical of energy, and all the people interested in economy are aware that we are losing competitiveness. It's not a surprise. We are losing our competitiveness since years now. And it's degrading and degrading and degrading. It's why I put a subtitle of my book, The Organized Destruction of Our Competitiveness. Organized means that, well, it was not like that in the past. Somebody have done something to change this competitiveness. And I'm very pleased to see that Mr. Draghi is working on that, saying, well, we cannot continue like that. You know, he started the reporting saying that since the Cold War, we have never been in such a dramatic situation. We are on the board of a complete destruction of the European institution. I'm passionate for the EU. I want to save the EU. It's why I denounce what is not going well, because we need the EU, of course, but not this type of EU, which is organizing the destruction of our competitiveness.
Yes, because it looks like the European Commission is thinking never let a good crisis go to waste, and that it's basically using as a sort of power grab to get more power over the EU. And it's interesting because what you said, the organized destruction, so this was already thought out, and now out of the sudden they need 700 or 800 billion euros to fix an issue they have actually created themselves.
Yes, that's very strange that people believe that the solution is to spend more public money. To be fair, Mr. Draghi say that the 700, 800 billion euro should be shared by the private and the public. It doesn't say which part of the share. But it recognized that it could not be only public and it could not be private because it's huge. 700 billion is a lot of money. And how is it possible when you have such a big problem to say, just we'll put money and we will solve it? Well, we are not at in the 60s, 70s when this policy was still alive. We are in 2024 and coming back with the old solution of Keynesian policy when there is furthermore no more money available. The state are bankrupt. Yeah. So how is it possible to say that we are going to spend more public money to reverse the competitiveness? It's not with public money that we will solve it, sadly.
Yes, and I also want to talk about the timing that the report came out because we had, of course, the elections back in June when we all get to go to the ballot and voted for this new parliament. And they decided, even though the report was already written and finished by that time, to publish it just now, months after the elections. And probably, like you said yourself, is that it would have changed the outcome. People would have voted differently. In what way do you think that if this report would have been published back in June or like maybe May, the outcome of the elections would have been different?
In April, the Financial Times said that the Draghi report is considering to spend 500 billion. At that time, it was 500 billion. So if the Financial Times knew that there will be 500,000 billion, it means that they knew the report, of course. And furthermore, the 16th of April, during the Belgian presidency, during the 6-month presidency of Belgium, Mr. Draghi gave a conference near Brussels in La Hulpe, and all the press was talking about this because the report, as you said, Scarlett, the report was ready or nearly finished, but mainly it was there. So I would have expected that such an important report saying that we need to change something should have been published before the election of 9th of June. Between 16th of April and the 9th of June, there was time to fine-tune the report if it was not finished and to publish it in order that the citizen knew what is the situation and what are the solutions that we can contemplate. No, they published after the election. So I think it's a lack of transparency. It's sad because the EU is always ready to give a lesson to the other. But here, in this case, they really hide information.
Yeah, so basically it's manipulation of the elections, not something that you would expect or would want to see in a democracy. And you yourself have written a report on the report of Draghi, and you said about the recommendations, and I'm going to quote, if these recommendations are adopted, they risk further weakening the EU's economy vitality and energy security while only minimally impacting global emissions. Before we discuss, the further downsides of the recommendations that are made, could you explain more about the recommendations as are written in this report?
First of all, I have to say that I have just analyzed the aspect of energy of this report. I'm not specialist on the other topics, so I have not looked at it or I have not anything to say. It's not my job. But on energy, I have deeply analyzed, and I say that the proposals are bad, just bad. They propose at the end globally. They say we are in big difficulties with our competitiveness. We are going to put money in order to continue the same policy. Well, this is a nonsense. If you recognize that there is a problem, it's not in putting more money that you will solve the problem. And this is the weakness of the Draghi report. He knows that there is something wrong. He say that there is something wrong. But he do not have the courage to say, well, Mrs. Commission, this time you need to be serious and stop what you have done. Stop the subtitle of my book, the organized destruction of the competitiveness. Because what they are doing, indeed, if you analyze the report, is to say, okay, the solution is renewable energy, we should do more. When I say it's the reverse, it's because we have pushed so much inefficient, expensive renewable energies that have no impact globally on the CO2 emissions, that we are in a difficulty. So the problem is just there. They see the iceberg and they look at the top and they say, we will continue passing by. Well, they will hit the the iceberg.
Yeah, because one of the things, exactly like you said, what was recommended is that there would be more invested into renewable energy. What you're basically saying is that this is one of the causes as well that we're losing our competitiveness, because other countries, and especially the BRICS countries, they will continue to use fossil fuels.
Yes, because it's not that fossil fuel are wonderful. Fossil fuel have created the richness in which we are in OECD countries. We are in a area where we have good quality of life, good sanitation, good hospitals, good school, good vacation, because we use fossil fuel. All the good things that we have are coming from the use of fossil fuel, mainly oil for the transportation and gas for the industry or heating the houses. Coal a little bit in Poland and a few other countries. But the rest of the world want to copy us. They want that they enjoy the life like we enjoy it. And they know that we have been created the society in which we are thanks to the use of fossil fuel. And so they recognize that they will use that. And it's not because we had windmill and solar panel that we have created the richness of the European countries. The richness of European countries come from the use of fossil fuel. And the other will copy what we have done, and they will not copy to give 600, 700, 800 million of 1,000 billions just to build windmill.
Yeah, to summarize it, I think the core line is that we need energy in order to have prosperity. And it was also I had the pleasure of interviewing you before when you made a statement that the whole reason initially why we had the EU was to actually supply cheap energy, because as like we said, you need to have cheap energy in order to have prosperity and for society to blossom. Now that we're moving away from fossil fuels and completely are moving forward to only renewable energies, those prices have skyrocketed in terms of energy. I think we have now, what is it, 50 to 125 million people in Europe living in energy poverty. And one thing that Draghi said, and this really stood out to me, said, we have reached a point where if we do not act, we will have to compromise our well-being, our environment, our freedom. It's interesting that he says we have to compromise our well-being, because in my opinion, we have already compromised that. But given the fact that people cannot even afford to heat up their homes or pay for food, which is a human need. You need to have a warm place to live and you need to have food. So at this point, what exactly are we sacrificing our well-being for? Are these recommendations really going to make such a big difference, or are they just for show?
Thank you very much for this question. 10 days ago or 2 weeks ago, I was attending a conference of MCC Europe. And there was a discussion about the meaning of competitiveness. And one of the speakers explained that the competitiveness is not probably the best word to use, but we should prefer to use prosperity. Because what we need is not to be competitive toward another country, but to allow us to be prosper and the other also to be prosper. Because we cannot be rich and prosper in our own if the other are not doing the same. It's the same thing with the richness, personal richness. We cannot be rich for our own. We need also to help the other to become rich. Therefore, the final aim is to have prosperity. And the prosperity, as you said, is coming from the possibility to work. And the possibility to work means that we need to have energy. And therefore, we need cheap and abundant energy. Everything is linked. Competitiveness is prosperity, as prosperity is energy, and we need cheap and abundant energy. If we reverse the logic in saying that we need to save the planet, and therefore the energy should not produce CO2, we are destroying the competitiveness and the prosperity. And it's why, thank you also for mentioning that Mr. Draghi say that we should select the three main drivers in the EU. Do we want to remain free? Are we giving up our freedom? Or are we giving up our well-being? Or are we giving up our policy on climate change? Because it's not possible to reach the tree. It is a clear statement of Mr. Draghi. We cannot reach the tree. That means that if we want to continue to say that we will save the planet, energy should be expensive. If it is expensive, you cannot have a well-being. We will not be able to go on holiday. And if it is not possible, they will, at the end, oblige people not to take the plane, not to eat not to eat meat, and so on and so on. So it's really a question of freedom, of well-being, of fighting the climate change.
Professor Furfari, thank you so much for being with us here today and sharing all of your insights. I will make sure that we link your book down below if you want to know more about the energy insecurity that the European Union is currently facing. It's a recommendation, and of course, thank you so much for you at home for watching.
Thank you very much, Scarlett, for your invitation.